So welcome, everybody. We're still in the middle of chapter 23. We're going to finish chapter 23 today. And God willing, next week, starting chapter 24, the first of a 4-part series on chapter 24, which I'm sort of rebranding and about the first coronavirus of Jewish history, as we'll learn when we learn that parak in depth. That's not for today. Let's continue. We were in the middle of actually learning exactly the Gemara that before I turned on the recorder was mentioned. It's a Gemara in Masachet Moed Katan. I'm going to put it up on the screen because actually we were in the middle of it when I had to break last week for a levaya. And just to set the stage before I put it up, for those maybe who weren't with us last week, page 397. 96 and 97 in the Koren Tanakh. It's chapter 23. And we were learning the section in which we were learning what seemed on the face of it to be just a catalog of names of various people who were the mighty warriors of David. And that begged the question, why tell us this apropos what? What's the reason for it to be printed here when we have another Sefer in Tanakh called Divrei Hayamim, whose goal is really to catalog all names, starting from Adam, Harishon, and going all the way through the Malchut Beit David. One could argue, obviously, chronologically, well, Sefer Shmuel is written earlier, so it had to be put somewhere until Sefer Divrei Hayamim was written later. Fair point, but I return again to the question of why catalog them here and now in a section that, according to many commentators, some don't agree, according to many commentators, is actually a reference to events that transpired earlier in the life of David HaMelech, and these are they are appended to the book. So the narrational portion concludes in a chronological manner, and then you have several episodes that actually transpired earlier, but they're placed here. Question is why, and this that's what we've been trying to figure out, at least according to that sense of things. Why are these sections the coda for the book? This is the end of all of Sefer Shmuel. Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, it's really one book. This is the end of it. So here are some sort of snapshot episodes after we finish telling the story, where the main overarching, generally speaking, the main overarching operative principle methodologically is to move in a chronological manner to keep the story together. Now we're sort of dialing back. Okay, here are some episodes that weren't put in earlier. Why are they here? Why weren't they earlier? And it's a very sharp question when we get particularly to this catalog of names, because we're not sure what it actually signifies. I mentioned last year, we won't go back down that road again. There's actually an earlier point, chapters earlier, that makes reference already to the notion of these mighty warriors of David. And it's Dafka, not a full list there, it's here. Why? What's its significance? Now, along those lines, one of the things that we saw was the take that Chazal have on this in the Gemara, in Masachet Moed Katan. I'll put it up on the screen again. The truth is we were in the middle of it when we parted company last week, somewhat unfortunately, owing to a funeral. So here it is up on the screen. Let me just magnify it so you can see it a little bit better. It is the section of the Gemara, Masachet Moed Katan, that parses these psukim. I actually deliberately, then as now, skipping these few lines of the Gemara. We'll dial back to them if there's time. The Gemara we saw last time, just to review, was that these names of the mighty warriors of David were Maika Amar. The Gemara itself is asking, what is the meaning of this? The notion of Yoshev Bashevet. Is that someone's name? Is that a place? What is it? The Gemara wants to know. Look at the Sensino translation, very good translation, Yoshev Bashebeth, which is a great translation. We don't know what to do. You just write the words in some kind of transliteration. That's what they did. Every translation, by the way, does this. Every translation. Look in the Art Scroll Chumash in many instances, but especially you get to all the names of all the different birds and types of creatures, and it'll actually just transliterate the names, because the writers of the translation are not entirely sure of the taxonomy of those species. The same thing's going on here. The Gemara said, okay, Micah Amar, Amrabi Abo Hachika Amar, Ve'ele Shmot Gvurotav Shel David. These are not just the names of the mighty warriors of David, which, by the way, they might have actually been the actual names when you look it up in the book of Chronicles, which we'll see a little later this morning. Those are the names of his mighty men. The way those names are phrased here, they're worked over in a particular manner of phraseology in order to amplify another theme. Now, why couldn't it just say it outright? Why is it hinted at? That's another question. I'm leaving that one hanging for now. And we'll probably get back to it a little later this morning. Here are the mighty deeds of David. What are those? Yoshev Bashevet, B'shah Yoshev B'yeshiva, Lo Yoshev Al Gabi Karmik Satot, to tell us the mightiness of David, his mightiness not in military exploits, but here in terms of humility. He sat, when he was sitting in yeshiva, he didn't sit comfortably. Karim v'kasatot means pillows, blankets, but it's taken to be a sign of comfort or of ease. He sat on the floor. Ella al gabe karka. He sat on the floor. Dechoma dehava rabbe ira hayairi kayam. As long as his Rebbe Ira Yairi was his name, as long as he was alive. Havamatni lehul rabbanan al gabe karim v'kasatot. Ki nachnafshe havamatni David l'rabbanan vaviyativ al gabe karka. As long as his Rebbe was alive, he sat on the ground. As long as he was the one teaching, he sat on the pillows and the blankets, sat a little bit elevated. They sat down. The students sat on the ground, including David HaMelech. After he died, they installed David HaMelech as his successor, and they asked David, "Won't you sit as your master sat?" Amrulei leitiv mara kasatot. That's where the Rebbe sits. It's the rabbi's chair. So lo kabil alei, he refused to accept this upon himself. In other words, he humbled himself, and it's accorded as an act of mightiness and greatness of David. He was unwilling to take any of the trappings of the office. Yeah, let's move myself over here. It's not in the way, right? Unwilling to take any of the trappings of office. Why didn't Pshat just tell us that? That's the question. That's sort of like the elephant in the room. But I could say as an early, maybe easy answer on a technical level, this is the interpretation of Chazal on the level of Medrash. On the level of Pshat, it's just a list of names. But the very fact that there are two of them, and one of them differs slightly from the other, and one place, Chronicles, Divrei Yamim, that's its headquarters, because that's where all the names begin. And here in Sefer Shmuel Bet, it seems disjointed to the story. Yes, you could say, well, it's the end of the book, so you want to list off sort of the credits at the end. Okay, if that's true, why is this the penultimate chapter and not the ultimate chapter of the book, number one? Number two, why give us all of these names? What exactly is their significance to know all these people? Number three, there was already an earlier abridged list back many chapters earlier, which is another place that many Mefarshim believe is, again, a seam within the book between episodes that might have not actually been arrayed in direct chronological order, but might have been actually deliberately listed out of sequence. So from this little vignette, Tachkemoni, you could see in the pasuk, it's on page 396, the last paragraph there. Eilish Shmona Giborim. It's again chapter 23 in the book of Shmuel Bet, verse 8. Pasuk Parachav Gimel pasuk Chet. Eilish Shmona Giborim Shel David Yosef Bashevet Tachkemoni Rosh Shalishi Hu Adino Ha'etzni Al Shmona Meot Chalal B'Fam Echad. And last time we had that whole excursus discussion, which is an important discussion about why there's so many Greek thieves in the world of Nach, and the simple answer is look at what's going on in the Sefer Torah. So few Greek thieves because there are such stringent halachot about Safrit, about how to write a Sefer Torah, and the great fealty that we have from a halachic vantage point to make sure to preserve it in its pristine form. And with Nach, it's a little looser. You see the net result here, Greek thief. There are other answers, other responses. Chazal have their own ideas, which I don't think conflict with what I'm saying at all, but in terms of darshaning Krieg Tiv, that maybe this was a part of the Masoretic text from the beginning as well. These are baked in. Okay, I won't go further down that road. It'll take us too far afield again. So let's stick with the program. Tach Kemoni, Amarav, Amarlah Kadosh Baruch Hu, Ho'il Shpalta Atzmecha. You made yourself low like me. You made yourself low, excuse me. Tehei Kamoni, you will be now like me. On account of being willing to lower yourself. Now, what is the mightiness of lowering oneself? That's what would be codified later in Jewish history by Ben Zoma. Ezu Gibor Kaveshet Yitzro, who's the the mighty man. The mighty one is the one who is able to conquer their inclination. I see you have unstable internet here, so give me a second. I'm going to switch networks. Okay, I hope you're still with me. Yes, if someone could just chat in whether you can hear me or not, that would be so helpful, because otherwise it's kind of baffling if you're really here.
Now I can hear you. Right before I couldn't.
Okay, I just switched over, so okay, fair enough. All right, back to this. It's also the idea here that Kadosh Baruch Hu and David HaMelech, or rather the opposite, David HaMelech as a servant of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, when he sees David in the role of the servant of the Eved, that finds favor in his eyes, right? So hey kamoni, shani gozer gzeira, I make a decree, the atam avatla, you David have the power to nullify the decree that I make. Now, for those who are reading the Gemara in a linear fashion, we skipped. You would have understood this already. What does it mean that God can make a decree and David is going to upend the decree? That's the little section here from the very beginning of chapter 23 in Sefer Shmuel Bet. It appears in Pasuk Gimel, Pasuk number 3. Right? Amar Elokei Yisrael, li diber tzu Yisrael, Moshel ba'adam tzadik, Moshel yirat Elokim. That verse, also a cryptic verse, the Gemara here asks also, Maika Amar, what actually does it mean? Amar Rabbi Abahu, Halkam, here's what it means. Amar Elokei Yisrael, so said the God of Israel. Li diber tzu Yisrael, ni Moshel ba'adam, mi Moshel bi tzadik. Shini gozer gzeira umevatla. God, the God of Israel, I'm the rock. I decide what's going to be. I make a decree. Who can overrule me? Who rules over God, so to speak? The tzaddik. That God can make a decree and the tzaddik can have it canceled and nullified. This is what we mean when we talk about the idea, firstly, of intercessory prayer, where the tefillah of a tzaddik has a certain efficacy. This is what we mean to refer to a people of great spiritual stature who try, if they need to engage with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. He, as it were, invites a person through the meritocracy of Torah, mitzvot, which of course includes as part and parcel of it ethical behavior, moral behavior, piety, etc. All of that enables an individual even to, as it were, enter into a dialogue with Kadosh Baruch Hu and to nullify the decree of Hashem. That's mainstay. This is not a more recent accretion of a more recent movement in Judaism. This is the Gemara Masechet Moed Katan. Therefore, God tells, as you flow through the Gemara now, as David sat on the floor, Hashem said to him, you nullify yourself to such an extent, I will, if I make a decree, you will have the power of upending said decree. Now that is not a blank check. And that should be fairly obvious, as we have seen and profiled and learned through this Sefer, through many shiurim and through many months. That didn't mean that David HaMelech, the great tzaddik, didn't, number one, sin, and two, receive punishments. It's not a blank check. It wasn't a blank check that he could do no wrong. And it's also not a blank check that it means that every single time that tzaddik speaks, that Hashem is going to listen. I'm going to take a few questions and comments before we go any farther. But before I do, Helen, give me one more second. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. It's so nice to see everyone in this tumultuous time. It's good to have the stability of learning. Helen, give me one more minute. I wanted to point something else out about the word tzaddik.
Okay, excuse me. Okay.
Just give me half a sec, Helen. At a certain moment in Jewish history, the notion of the tzaddik took on a certain differentiated meaning from the meaning that it has here. And I want to just make mention of it, and I say it in a friendly manner, not with any measure of bitterness or guile or critique, but it is a fact that one of the main doctrines of Chassidut is the notion of the tzaddik. And this is the idea of the tzaddik as a great pious individual. An individual has these perhaps theurgic powers. He can influence a Kadosh Baruch Hu, maybe more so than others. This is one of the main elements that was opposed by the people who became known as the Mitnagdim, the opponents. This is one of the main doctrines that they opposed, not because they were opposed to the Gemara Masachet Moed Katan, but because they were concerned, number one, that's not in any order. One of the things they were concerned about is the notion of institutionalizing a dynasty, and each person who heads it up is automatically called the tzaddik, regardless of their comportment, regardless of their piety, regardless of their sagacity. They were just getting a title. And that was problematic for those who became known as the mitnagdim. Another problem is the problem of the continuum between Jewish people who ask others who are masters of prayer to pray on their behalf in addition to their own prayers, and individuals who start to vest the persona of the tzaddik with such great powers, abilities, that it becomes, God forbid, a cult of personality, that it could become some kind of intercessor, becomes an intermediary, and maybe even a block between individuals' relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These were some of the things that the mitnagdim strenuously tried to and vociferously fought against in the world, against when Chassidut was brought about. As I like to quote the vignette, which may or may not be apocryphal, one time when my Rebbe's Rebbe, Rav Yosef Dov Halevi Soloveitchik returns from a tish at 770 with the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh Livracha. Apparently, it's an apocryphal story, but it rings true, that someone said to him, Rebbe, it's so beautiful. We saw you up on the dais at 770, and you represent the world of the Litvish, represent the Vilna Gaon and the whole line of the Mitnagdim. And here, one of the great Rebbes of the Chassidut, and you're sitting together, and it's really wonderful. The two of you made peace. And the Rav Soloveitchik, purportedly retorted, we actually already made up in Auschwitz and Majdanek. And that crucible of Jewish history, that horrific time, laid to rest a lot of the conflicts that existed and that simmered in the pre-war era, oftentimes between Hasidim and Mitnagdim. That said, there's much to be said in the positive vein about the Olam of Hasidut, its Torah, and even some of the ways that it organized itself. However, we should understand that the use of the term tzaddik in this context, in the Gemara Masachet Moed Katan, is not the way entirely that it was applied historically with the advent of Hasidut. Helen, that was the longest one sentence. Thank you for your indulgence. I'm sorry. Please go ahead with questions, comments, and I'll take from anybody who'd like to speak before we move ahead.
You actually shed a lot of light. This last Shabbos, the juxtaposition, Yosef, after Yaakov dies, tells the brother, Al Tiru, because the heading of this is Lo Sikom, the Lo Sitor.
Yeah.
The Haftorah has a totally different juxtaposition.
Right.
That David is putting coals in the Hanukkah stockings, and a totally different idea of Lo Sikom and Lo Sitor. So your idea of the glorification of the word tzaddik needs a lot of editing.
I hear you.
And those two juxtaposition of the two Lo Sikom, Lo Sitor.
I hear you, absolutely. And I'm glad you referenced the Haftorah, which is coming attractions for us when we get to the beginning of Sefer Malachim, which is just a number of weeks away till we open up Sefer Malachim once again. And we'll have to reckon with that. I join with you that it would seem to be, on the face of it, very much at loggerheads with the presentation that we have here, certainly by Chazal. But I will remind you, Helen, number one, Chazal did see great people as complex people, which was not to excuse their flaws, foibles, or sins, but to see those in context of the complexity of the persona. We'll have to say, I can't reckon with it now. You're absolutely right. It's like, and that's a strange, and I think in the face of it, I don't know about you, when you're reading the Haftorah, You're recoiling. He's on his deathbed telling his son, okay, there's this guy and this guy and this guy. I promised I wasn't going to get rid of them, but use your wisdom. Cue up the niggin from a certain film from the 1970s. Yeah. But that's neither here nor there for today. I'm just focused on the idea that here what Chazal are telling us is there's something strange about the phraseology of chapter 23. It's hinting to certain other aspects of David HaMelech that are not, I join with you, they are not overt in the pshat, such as that he abased himself or self-effaced, rather is probably a better term, in terms of learning. Even when by rights he could step up and sit, oiven un, as they say, in the mizrachvant, he said, no, I'm going to stay on the floor. And the idea that he had a certain element that he was known as a tzaddik, at least as far as this Gemara is concerned, that he had the power to overturn a gzeira. By the way, David HaMelech, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayam. How do I know? Because yesterday, in the midst of the crisis that was going on, I came to Mincha, and when Mincha finished, I clapped on the standard, said, before we learn, we're going to say Tehillim from the Sefer of David, Malka Mashiach. His words are still being used until today. When we reach out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, say, can you please, Hashem, we're not big tzaddikim, but we'll quote the words from David. Hopefully that'll be enough. Yeah, that's what we're doing. That's what we're doing. Right? We're quoting David's words.
Well, thank you. As I said, my son is Chaim David.
Beautiful name.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. Anybody else, or should I move on into Gemara? Can I move on a little further in the Gemara? More questions, comments at this point? Okay. So let's move forward a little bit in the Gemara. We haven't seen the next Gemara, which is going to take us most of the rest of today, I see. But okay, but we have to finish this parak today because I'm on a schedule already with I see Purim and Pesach coming already. In my world, it's already Pesach. So we got to try to wrap things up, and I want to do this series about viruses and plagues, because that's germane to the next chapter. Rosh Shalishim Te Rosh Lishloshet Avot. It was here that, indeed, as you pointed out when we started, Shelley, that God tells David HaMelech, you'll be at the helm, at the head of the three patriarchs. Just strange thing to say. We had here, down here, Rashi wrote Rosh Lishlosha Avot. He'll go before them for in the world to come. Yeah. So there was a toaster, but I can't find it now. I must have erased it accidentally. Okay. Go in front of them in the world to come. Now it doesn't say why that should be the case. It doesn't say because he's a great Baal Tshuva. Did Hashem tell him these words exactly at this moment prior to any of the other events with David and Bathsheba? Maybe. Maybe he told it to him, and that was part of what pumped David up to think, oh, if I'm so high, I'm such a great tzaddik, can never do anything wrong. But that was a big mistake. So that could be. A third possibility is, in fact, Hashem did not actually directly say to David HaMelech, you will be at the helm of the three patriarchs. He never said that to him directly. Yes, it's Zamarav, Amarla Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's true. But it could be that it means not that Hashem said it directly to him, but Hashem told the Navi, write it this way in the book. But it's not actually conveyed to David that he's walking around. I'm like the three patriarchs. I'm at the helm. Au contraire, it's a statement about David HaMelech that appears in the third person here, printed here. Remember? It's not David speaking. These are the mighty men of David, which the Gemara learns as these are the names or the labels on that name the mightiness of David. So it doesn't have to mean that David heard these words from God or that he was even aware of them. It could, but maybe that was part of what ended up setting him up, for a problem down the line. I don't know. I would say as a cardinal a point of belief based on the Rambam Udi Imei, a person is endowed with free will. And I don't subscribe to the idea that Hashem set David up to fail. It exonerates David from culpability and moral responsibility and agency. And conversely, it also reduces his ability to shine as a great soul that engaged in a process of tshuva, which unfortunately involved terrible suffering as part of that process. Lo aleinu. So that's as far as that. Who do you know? Etzli kshayoshev osik b'Torah hayam adin atzmo ketolat. He would contort himself to be like a worm. He had this uncanny ability to balance his strenuous way of being, his forcefulness, where on the battlefield, with great passivity and again self-effacement. He's making himself into a worm in order to sit and learn. What's the concept? That he did not have a personality which was so headstrong that he didn't know his place in different contexts. You have such personalities so headstrong, like a bull in a china shop, with everything they do in their relationships and their learning and their business. Everything is, it's my way or the highway. He didn't work that way. When it came to learning, there was a certain humility. And we're going to see another example of that coming up. Al Shmona Meot Chalal is where we had stopped last time. So Al Shmona Meot Chalal b'fam achat, that he felled 800 at one time, 800 enemies. She'azorek chetz mapil Shmona Meot Chalal b'fam achat v'amitaneach al matayim. He felled 800. If you want to take it literally, be my guest. I don't see any reason not to, except if it boggles your mind. What does that mean? One arrow? Or does it mean when he went out to battle, they were very successful? They could very handily win with a ratio of 1 to 800, something like that. Yeah. So why did he groan when the fact that he was missing 200? Because it says dichtiv eicha yirdof echad elef yatz tabat kova amra. You know, so the great at the end of the Torah, we have this list of curses and blessings and curses. So we have this on the blessing side, so and on the curse side, that there'll be a ratio of 1 to 1,000. Again, whether the Jewish people are winning or the Jewish people are losing, the idea that it's so lopsided in terms of the ratio of who should win naturally and who does win is either a great reward or a great punishment, depending on whether the Jews are on the side of the winners or the losers. So what happened to the extra 200? Why is there a discrepancy? Why was he groaning over those 200? So Yatzta Batkol the Amra, a heavenly voice, an echo, divine echo, came out and proclaimed, Rak bidvar Uriah Hachiti. Only in the matter of Uriah Hachiti. Which means the fact that he sent Uriah Hachiti to his death on the battlefield. And therefore he was punished, that he was going to be denied this 1 to 1,000 ratio. It was always a check on his record. So right now you could say to me, wait, the Uriah Hachiti thing didn't happen yet. And this is probably starting from before. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. This could have been written as a, sort of a retrospective portion, looking back at his whole life. But then the vignettes that are coming, we're going to come to the vignettes, it's the next section, did happen earlier on. And I showed you that last time. We had looked it up on the map to see, there's the war against the Plishtim. We had looked this up. If you look up, we never looked up the Divrei Yamin piece, but I think we're going to have to skip it. Well, we'll get to it actually, but probably not today. It's the name of Uriah Hachiti in the Divrei Yamin list. Skip. Let me just go with you as follows. On page 396, the bottom, top of 397, there is a little vignette. This story is about fighting and warring against the Plishtim. This story is a story that includes within it some strangeness about how David wants to get some water. He's trying to get water somehow. We had read that story last time. I don't want to belabor the point. I see again, I have weak internet. I hope it doesn't conk out on us here. If everyone could take a moment just to read it. Again, it should be review for almost all of us, right? That he somehow wants water from Beit Lechem. They go get it for him, and then he takes the water and he spills it out. And it's not clear why. It's a strange story. Hold your finger here and journey with me to Divrei Hayamim. If I put it up on the screen, it's Divrei Hayamim 1. It should be Chronicles 1. I forgot to put the 1. Chapter 11, verses 13 to 19. And if you go to that section, it's the end of the Tanakh, you'll find the story told with minor variation. Minor variation. Chapter 11, verse 13. It's on page 963 in the Koren Tanakh.
Rabbi, before you go to Divrei Hayamim,
Yes.
the Gemara from Moed Katan,
Yes.
Is that in the nature of midrash, or is
Of
there
course.
something? What?
Yes, of course it's a medrash.
Thank
Of course it's a medrash. Yes.
Thank
Yes.
you.
I was making the point though, from whence does the medrash emerge?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, what I'm saying is that's all the reasons I was giving in the beginning of the shir, that the chronology is already in Chronicles and Divrei Yamim, that it doesn't seem to give us any new information, that there are other catalogs elsewhere of names, and like then there's suddenly all these names.
Forgive me, that's not my question.
Oh.
My question is there a source in Tanakh that indicates that David was osek the Talmud Torah?
No. Pshat?
Okay.
Not aware of one.
All right. Fine.
It seems to me to be exclusively the province of Torah Sheba'al Peh.
Fine.
Yeah. Look with me at this story, page 963. And we have here the story. This story is not at the end of Chronicles 1. It's not like appended to the end of the book, right? Like this something happened late in life. It's sort of in the middle of David HaMelech's life. It's the time when he's going to Yerushalayim and he's having the war with the Plishtim. We learned about this in chapters, whatever it was, 4, 5, 6, that whole range. And we looked at the map last time to see, there's Emek Rafim, there's the Plishtim, there's the encampment, there was the Mitzudat David, etc. So, when we have this list here, Ve'ela Mispar Hagiborim Ashila David, there's a whole list here, and again with minor variation. Vide, what we just talked about before. Verse 13. Hu Hayayim David. Sorry, I mentioned the person's name. V'acharav Elazar ben Dodo ha'achochi hu b'shlosha hagiborim. Hu Hayayim David. That's the name of the person. Bapas damim v'plishtim ne'asfu sham lamilchama v'tihi chelkat hasadeh mele'as se'orim. So here we have the warring parties gathering together in this place, wherever it is, and we have here there are a lot of bales of barley, right? That are there.
It says lentils in the in Shmuel, verse verse 11. So why would there be a discrepancy on what it is?
Your question gives me a nod. Yes, correct. Question. Why is it a separate? It's a different object. Why? It's not just our question. It's going to be Chazal's question, trying to reconcile. The writers of Divrei Yamim were well aware of Shmuel Bet. So even if they did not remember, it's written up in Ruach HaKodesh. Why is it differentiated, right? So I'll have to figure that out further, right? In this patch of ground. And people are running away because of the Plishtim. So they went into this plot of land. They saved it. They beat back the Plishtim. There was a great salvation. Rosh al Hatzur el David Amarat Adulam Machne Plishtim Chona be'emek Refaim. We saw Emek Rifa'im last time. Right near, it is Emek Rifa'im of today. It's the same area, same vicinity. So there they are. But David az bam tzudal and etziv Plishtim az beveit lachem, and the main command post of the Plishtim is in Beit Lachem, which geographically is not far away from Yerushalayim at all. Vayitav David vayomar mi ashkeni mayim mibor Beit Lachem asher bashar. Who can bring me the water from there? So he asked for it, he desired it, just like in the book of Shmuel. As soon as he got it, he refused to drink it and he poured it out to God. Incredibly cryptic language. God forbid, basically says, be a sacrilege for me, from my God, that I should do such a thing. They put their lives on the line. I'm going to drink that which they brought on at risk of their lives. I won't drink it. This is what the three warriors did. 3 unnamed warriors, by the way. It's just very strange. It's very hard to understand what this is talking about. It's not just our question, though. It's Chazal's question. Again, trying to understand, if you go back now to Shmuel Bet, you go to see that story, it's in verse 11 and onward. Well, actually, even before, there's actually, it mentions the Chua Gdolah, but getting up against the Plishtim is in verse 10. And then in verse 11, we have someone named Agei Harari, and the Plishtim are gathering there. It's filled with lentils, and everyone's running from them, and they somehow save them from the Plishtim, these warriors, and there's a great salvation. And then 3 out of this group of the 30 go down, and they tell him what's going on. He really wants some water, and they bring the water, and he doesn't want to drink it. Same deal. We're trying to understand, what is this about? And in order to understand this, we should appreciate this is exactly the question of the Gemara. The Gemara is trying to figure it out. Quotes these psukim from Sefer Shmuel, and it says, "Ma kami boyale." What's the problem here? Why did he ask for the water? He got the water. He spilled out the water. What was the problem? What was he asking about? Like, he sent them on a fool's errand, because when they came back, there was nothing for them to do except hear him saying, "I would never drink it." Well, then why did you send us? Yeah, that's the question. So the Gemara here in Masechet Bava Kama happens to be talking about the following case, generally speaking. It's a case known as Tamun Be'esh. Tamun Be'esh means something that is hidden, that is burned in a fire. I would explain it as the Gemara does, the Mishnah, the Gemara. Very simply, an individual has hidden something in a haystack. Another individual lights a fire on their own property to clear crops. The fire gets out of control, and it burns the haystack on the other person's property. But it also burns they hid their silverware in the haystack, and it all gets melted, and now the artistry is destroyed. So they're upset. Is the person who lit the fire responsible for the haystack? Certainly. But are they responsible for everything that's hidden inside the haystack or not? Machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. As part of its analysis, the Gemara goes into a discussion where they're trying to parse this question using these psukim and this vignette, retrojecting the discussion to one that already was, if you will, prefigured by a story involving David asking for help, asking for guidance on the battlefield from the Sanhedrin. So he's come to them, and he is asking them what to do, basically. Why? There are crops in the field, and there are variously either people hiding in the field, or there is property hidden in those stacks, whatever they are. And whereas Rabbi Yehuda says that the person who lit their own field on fire, they caused this whole thing, and they're responsible even for, the case of the Gemara was actually clothing. The clothing was incinerated inside the haystack, so the fellow who lit the fire is responsible for everything. The Rabbanan disagree. They say that he's actually exempt from paying back what's hidden in the haystack, a limited liability, if you will. Now, what's the case here? The case here is apparently, and it's only filled in actually into Gemara by Rashi. I opened the Gemara in front of me, which I forgot to put in here, so I'll just tell it to you. But basically, when they were encamped together as a Jewish army, the fields did not belong to non-Jews, but to Jews. And they were querying whether or not, having burned the stacks in order to clear the field so they could see the enemy who were using it to hide, if they, the national treasury, was responsible to pay back also for everything hidden within those haystacks or not. And the answer that it was seeking was, as it turns out, is the machloket of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda says, yes, they have to pay back. Rabbanan say no. Now, bear with me. I mean, you could raise a hue and cry and say, wait a second. Excuse me, David HaMelech, where does it say in the Pshat that he's having some halachic discourse? The answer is nowhere. It's not in the Pshat. It's on the level of Medrash to understand sort of a backstory. Now, why did Chazal get to that? I maintain again, there are strange things about this story. As Shelley pointed out, the discrepancy between two stories about what the substance even is, right? Which makes it sound more like it's a parable and less like it's actually history, because you got the detail wrong. I mean, there's no wrong. It's the two different Sfarim, they're both written al pi Ruach HaKodesh. It's not like, and it didn't change magically, right? So you could have argued, no, these are two separate stories, but actually the Gemara conflates both stories and puts one over the other as an overlay. So let's see it here. Amar Rava, Amar Rabbi Nachman. Taman Be'esh Kamabayel. He's asking about Taman Be'esh, something hidden in the haystack. Ikar Rabbi Yehuda, full responsibility. Ikar Rabbanan, limited liability. Upashtule, my depashtule. This is a great answer. The Sanhedrin gave him whatever answer they gave him. That's not helping us. What's the answer? The Gemara is actually having this discussion as they got to the story. Ravuna Amar, Gedishim Desorim Disrael Havu, Dahavu Mitamre Plishtim Bahu. These were stacks of barley belonging to the Jews, but the Plishtim were hiding within them. The question was, juridically, are you allowed to save yourself, save your life with someone else's property? Yeah? Now, what do you mean, are you allowed to? Should you die? No, pikuach nefesh, right? I'm skipping down, don't get dizzy, but under this Gemara, here's Tosfot, it's on the page, but Tosfot says, does not mean, are you allowed to do it? The question is, the question is, if you save yourself using someone else's property, do you have to pay them back for whatever you damaged? Or do you say, look, I had to save my life, so you're also responsible to help me save my life, so I used your property to help me do the mitzvah of staying alive. Yeah? It was your mitzvah to try to save me. You didn't. I used your property. There's a big realm in halacha. It's also called Heinz's dilemma, right? The pharmacist is unwilling to part with the vaccine, and you could go in and steal it. So are you allowed to do that? There are a lot of implications there about, are you taking it from someone else, etc. In the Heinz dilemma, the issue is much more a choshen mishpat question. It's not that some people will not get the vaccine or the medicine. It's that there's a sense that there's price gouging going on the part of the pharmacist. So are you allowed to go in and commit an act of thievery to save yourself and then claim, well, you should have given it to me at cost, or something like that? I'm not parsing all the halachic issues, but this is the headquarters, one of the headquarters topics, sources rather, for this topic. So are you allowed to save yourself with the money of your friend? You have to pay them back or not? So shalchule, and they sent him back. What was the answer? First understanding of Rav Huna. You are not allowed to save yourself with the money of your friend, i.e., you cannot appropriate someone else's property in order to save yourself. You'd have to pay them back whatever damages of whatever jewels or, again, silverware or clothing they hid within the stacks. But then the Gemara says, the Sanhedrin pointed out to him that he rules. Ata melech ata. You are, however, the king, and you can take a particular license because you're the king of Melech. Poretz lasot lo derech ve'in mochin biyado. He can make a road wherever he wants. He can break through. No one can stop him. He doesn't have to pay for it. Eminent domain means the king takes over. This is one of the things that Shmuel HaNavi said to the Jewish people. You're going to hate the king. You want a king? Fine. Yeah, here's the king. But just know he can take your sons and daughters and conscript them to national service, and he can build a road wherever he wants, and he can take over your property. And you have no say in the matter. And you have no recourse legally. And you don't have to be compensated. So the Sanhedrin told him, you could do this because you're the king. Really, people are not allowed to do this. They would have to pay full monies, but not you, sire. Okay, that's opinion number one about what the case really was and what the answer was. Case option number two for Rabbanan, v'itema Rabba bar Meri Amru. Second opinion, Gedishim de'Saorin de'Yisrael havu, u'Gedishim da'Dashim de'Plishtim. We're back to Shelley's question from before. Why is it two different objects? So this second opinion says there are two different things at play because the Jewish people owned the barley and the lentils were owned by the Philistines, by the Plishtim. The Kamabayel, who is asking, Ma'uli told Gedishin shel Seorin, the Yisrael litain lifnei behemto, Amanat l'shalim, Gedishin shel adasim de Plishtim. Since we're at war with the Plishtim, and when you win, halachically speaking, there is such a thing as spoils of war, unless otherwise countermanded. It is permissible to take spoils of war. Said David HaMelech to the Sanhedrin, can I use the barley to feed my animals and then pay it back with the lentils of the Philistines, right? These are two different types of grains and legumes, grains, etc. They're not the same. Their value is not the same. So, are you allowed to do that? Is that permissible? Can I make that that case? Yeah. Can I just appropriate it again for my purpose? But unlike the first case where it's just about taking the thing that belongs to the to others and then just paying them back, here it's the substitution. Also, they won't get the same thing back. So, what was the response? The Sanhedrin answered him back. Shalchu le, they answered him back. Chavol yashiv, rasha gzela yishalem. All right, a wicked person will return a pledge and repays their theft. So afal pisha gzela mishalem, even though you're paying back your theft, rasha, who a person would do this, would be wicked. You're not allowed to just make that decision to arrogate that to yourself. Basically, the sages the second time answered in the same way. You cannot do this. But aval ata melech ata. So the same answer here and the same answer earlier as well, right? The sort of the caveat, but you're the king. You don't have to follow the same rules as everybody else. We don't need this highlight anymore. I'll take it away. Yeah. You don't need to follow the same rules as everybody else. So those are two approaches. Bishlam lamanda amar la'achlufe. Hanu chtiv chad kra vatihisham chalkat asdem le'adashim. V'chtiv chad kra utihi chalkat asdem le'adseorim. This makes sense. The second opinion does make sense if we're talking about a substitution, that there would be in two different contexts, two different objects that are being spoken about. El lamanda amar limakle, right? If you want to hold that actually this is a case where actually what's going on here is he wants to just burn down the stalks to clear the field, and then he's going to pay it back, right? What do you do with the fact there are two psukim that describe two different objects, types of objects in the field? So Amar Lach, the Gemara says, well, that opinion, that original opinion could say that really what's going on. Okay, there's also stacks of barley, and there are stacks of lentils, and one version did one version did the other, and there are actual Philistines hiding within them or behind them, so we're burning it down to clear it out. That makes sense if you say it's to burn it down. It says they set themselves in the middle of the portion and they saved it. But if the issue is really about a substitution, we want to feed our animals this belonging to these people, and then what we capture in the spoils of war, we'll give to the other people. So, right? So basically, what are you going to do in that case? Right? You'll say, well, what is it? Right? It means that okay, it was told you're not allowed to make the switch. Basically, you can't switch. Right? You wanted to switch, it told you not allowed to switch, but you're the king. Yeah. Bishlam hanitarte. We understand these two approaches now, modified version, how they reconcile the version in Shmuel Bet, the version in Divrei Hayamim. But wait a second, the Gemara says. Okay, next page. But the person who says this is really a case of Tamun Ba'esh, David was asking, am I responsible for objects hidden inside the stacks rather, right? So it's inside. So my ibayle kroi. Why do I need these two psukim? Yeah, but we don't need it. So Amar Lach, right? Here's the answer. David was asking him about whether he had to have liability for hidden items, hidden in the stacks by the destroyed by fire, and one of the other two questions. Either he's asking about saving himself someone else's property, or he's asking about taking produce and substituting with someone else. Yeah. I hope I still have everyone with me here. I didn't lose you. The point is, if you're losing focus, David is asking Shilas of the Sanhedrin Agadol about whether or not he can appropriate property on the battlefield. And it came up in the context of there's something extra hidden inside a bigger object. Are you responsible for that as well? Or do you say it's limited liability? All right. So the Gemara again asks the following. We get it if you say that there are two different sections here. He didn't want to drink it. So it says he didn't even want to drink it. What does he mean he doesn't want to drink it? What didn't he want to drink? There's no liquid in this story. Yeah? So Amar, says the Gemara, Amar, what it means is that he was saying to himself, Kaven de'ika isura lanichali. Since my doing this, I've been told, would involve something that is forbidden to me, I'm just not going to do it. Now, was it really forbidden to him? Twice they said to him, I left it underlined, but you're the king, you don't have to follow the rules. And what is David responding here? No, thank you. I know that I can use my royal right. I refuse to exercise my royal right. And this Gemara and this vignette now, if we plug it in to what we saw previously today, lines up as another aspect of the mightiness of David HaMelech. So, of course, you could say back to me, yeah, what about the story of Uri and Bathsheba? Right. Either A, lesson learned, and this happened later, or B, here he had things lined up in a moral manner. And then afterward, with Bathsheba, Uri, etc., he fell down. But that those were aberrations on a general approach. Now, the Gemara here goes on and says, if you're going to say it's one of the first two cases that it's either about burning someone else's property to save yourself, or it's about substitutions in order to save your animals and then pay them back, then it all works out. What does it mean? That he said, I don't want to take from this. So he said the water doesn't mean literally the water, but rather this knowledge. Even though I'm off the hook technically, does this sound familiar to something else that we've talked about? Even though I'm off the hook technically, it would still be not a moral thing for me to do, and therefore I'm not going to do it. Is this not the opposite, the mirror image of the story of what happens where the Gemara describes how technically David gets off the hook for, at least for the Bathsheba part of the story? I won't go down that. I'm not opening that now, but the Gemara does explain that in those days, everyone gave a get to their wife provisionally before they went out to the place of battle in case they didn't come back, to avoid aguna situations. Yeah. But then Natan Hanavi shows up and says, yeah, technically, yeah, but you're guilty. And that's what's going on here in the converse. But the Gemara here says, if really the question was actually about burning things, and there's the question of whether the liability extends, the responsibility to pay back extends also to what's inside. So what's going on here? Yeah. So Michtig Gemara hu d'shalchulei Milo Ava David l'shtotam. If it's true that he was asking a question technically about what to do, but whether he had to pay it or not. So they sent him the answer. So what does it mean he didn't want to drink the waters that they sent him? The Gemara says, Delo amarinhu mishmaihu. He did not speak the words in the name of the people who brought it to him. He omitted their names, and that's why in both cases it doesn't tell you who these Giborim are, the three who went down. Amari said, Kach mekublanu beit dino shel Shmuel Ramati. So I learned from the Beis Din of Shmuel, Kolamoser atzmo lamut al divrei Torah, ein omrim dvar halacha mishmo. Anyone who's willing to give their life for a piece of Torah, in the sense that they're putting their life at risk. So I won't quote a dvar halacha in their name. A strange idea to try to understand what this means. So there are a lot of different pathways over here. Let's finish the Gemara first. He poured it out to Hashem. It makes sense. He poured it out before God means he could have taken this Torah and run with it and he'd be exonerated. He didn't want to do it. He refused, right? Mishum da'avid l'shem shamayim. There's l'shem shamayim. He said, I'm not, it would be bad. It would be wrong for me, even though technically I could say I'm the king and I'm entitled. I'm not going to use my entitlement. Another aspect of greatness of David. But elamandam or ton be'esh, ma v'yasachtam la'Hashem. Right? So what does it mean that he poured it out to Hashem? So it means that the Amarinhu Mishma de Gemara, that it was quoted anonymously, that it was a teaching without saying who taught it to him. Right? The halachic ruling that David had reported to him is now being reported onward as simply a result of his inquiry, but without mentioning the names of the people. So it's a bit of a question. What does it mean that a person who gives themselves over to death for a Dvar Torah, so we don't say the halacha in their name? A lot of different approaches. Let me give a suggestion, I suppose. The idea here that they're on a battlefield and they're in the thick of things having to be done, and yet David sent these people, and they came back and started explaining to him this whole halachic exposition, even though he is one who requested it, he commissioned it. Nonetheless, when it returned to him, he realized this shouldn't be quoted in anyone's name. It should be just about the story that happened without personalities being mentioned. And not necessarily in the critical sake, per se, in the critical manner, but rather in the way that would say he was engaged in reminding everyone that the Torah doesn't belong to any individual. There's no reason to quote it in anyone's name. Rather, from the vignette, let people know that already in the days of David HaMelech, this notion, the Tamun Ba'esh question, was already being analyzed. By the by, in the end, the reality is that it's not clear from this Gemara here. So what's the answer? Do you have to pay for what's in the haystack or not? It's a machloket Rabbanan and Rabbi Yehuda. Not actually resolved. There are other approaches, but we're already running a little short on time. Let me take questions and comments about this Gemara before we do anything else.
I have a question.
Please.
So did he have a Sanhedrin with him, like a Sanhedrin of 3 that he
No, he sent it to the Sanhedrin.
So he sent this question to them? He brings down the field and says, hey, what do I do with this?
Yes. Sanhedrin located presumably in the environs of Beit Lechem, not in Yerushalayim yet, because he's not in Yerushalayim yet, not fixed at least. And Sanhedrin hasn't moved there, but he goes to find, he sends emissaries, go find them, go tell them, go ask them what's supposed to happen now.
Okay, what do we do today when we're in war? Israel's in war, right? There's a war in, or they go to the Gaza and they burn down somebody's house. Do they pay back? They burn down a house to seek a terrorist or something.
Yeah.
What happens today? What's the halacha?
Okay, not a simple matter. I actually gave a 6-part series about this in like 2011 with 2012. We're trying to parse all these issues, but these are real halachic issues. There's among the poskim, there's one of them, he's on the younger side. His name is Rav Yosef Tzvi Rimon. He has a little set. I have it actually up here on my shelf here in my home. It's called Hilchot Tzava, and he actually has shilas and shuvas where people actually asked him. By the way, they texted him from the battlefield. They're in someone's house and they have kosher food somehow there. I don't know what the nature of the food is. It's like something that had a hechsher on it that somehow made it into Gaza. The people are not in the house. The soldiers are hungry. Are they allowed to eat the food? And if they eat the food, they have to leave the money. These are real shilas. In Israel today, according to the rules of Tzahal, the ethics of Tzahal, it is absolutely forbidden for any personal soldier to take any spoils of war or to damage property if it's not for operational reasons. And if it is operational, there's these things where they still do it. I'm not taking tales out of shul over here. Everybody knows this. They broke through walls in people's homes in order to get at terrorists without having to break down a front door, lest it, that be booby trapped or what have you. So these are real time questions. And actually, I won't tell you the whole series now. It was several parts long. We didn't record it. It's on Shabbos that I gave it. But let's say that there is a paucity of development in halacha on these matters, because for centuries, there are no shilas about this, right? So nobody actually, and so poskim today in Israel deal with these kinds of shilas. Okay, Shelley, go ahead.
Rabbi.
Oh, Helen first. Okay. Shelley, you want to wait? Give a second.
So I'll make it quick. Does Mishpatim shed any light on anything related to this particular issue?
Yes, the headquarters of the sugya of Talmud Be'esh, the psukim, the verses are actually in Parshat Mishpatim. Yes, it's the basis, yeah, for all the discussions. That's correct.
What is that pasuk? How does that pasuk go?
Kitetse Eish, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to butcher the pasuk, but the section.
I don't remember that.
It actually talks about setting fire to on your property, and it gets out of hand. And are you held liable for that? Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Shelly, go ahead.
Okay, David says he doesn't want to name the people who gave the opinion that he's not going to take. Okay, but the Gemara always names the opposing sides to any kind of argument or machloket. So
right.
Why David not doing it? It's well settled that you put forth the opposing opinions, and then if there's one that's accepted over the others, then you say that.
What the Gemara, you're right. That the Gemara seems to be saying here in this case is, why did the Navi rather efface the names of the people who brought the information? It effaced their names because of some way in which they brought the news. In one reading of it, it's like it's a punishment to them that they took their lives in their hands. It's strange to me to understand it that way because David sent them. So if David sent them, okay, right? So then why didn't he just accept it? They didn't bring him a machloket back. They brought him a report of something definitive that the Sanhedrin said, and actually in the Gemara, well, the Mishnah really, and onward, it's actually debating back and forth what the answer is. It was no longer clear, right? Now the Maharsha on this Gemara says that anyone, it quotes the line of Chazal, anyone kol omer davar b'shem omer mevi gula olam. If you quote something in the name of the one who said it, you bring redemption to the world. A perfect opportunity for David, yet he didn't quote it in their name. Why? The point is that they went to a place that was dangerous and they were somech al hanes. And if you go somewhere and you try deliberately to rely on a miracle, it's not appropriate that a miracle should be done for you. And therefore, redemption should not come to your hand. What the Maharsha actually writes is, he engages in one sentence, but he engages it as he says, this is unbelievable. Don't we have a principle in Chazal? The Gemara itself says that shluchei mitzvah will not be harmed. Are you still with me? You're all frozen. Okay, right? Emissaries of the, everyone looked frozen for a minute. You're so riveted, probably. Emissaries on their way to do a mitzvah will never be harmed. So if they never be harmed, so what's the problem? They didn't put themselves in any danger. They didn't do anything wrong. They did exactly what they were supposed to do, right? By going out to the field to ask this question of the Sanhedrin Agadol, right? So the Maharsha answers, yeah, but as the Gemara itself points out, heicha the shchicha hezeka, in a place where there actually is the possibility of danger. So then there's no such principle that will say that a person who is on the way to do a mitzvah is going to be protected. These people, you could say, because they were working for David, they said, who cares? This is the Maharsha, by the way. I forgot to show it to you, but this is it, right? So it says here, yeah, well, what about the Chola Omer Davar B'Shem Omer, you can bring redemption. But these people, what was their problem? They somehow relied upon miracles. They went to a place of danger. So therefore, it's not appropriate to do a miracle for them or to bring redemption through them. Even though we do say the shlichei mitzvah are not harmed, where there is a clear and present danger, that's not the same thing, because then you're inserting yourself into it and causing a situation where you want to rely upon miracles deliberately. That's another approach here, if you will. Shelley, another layer here just to understand is the fact that there is a question as to why it is altogether that any names are cited in Chazal. Meaning, when you look at a Mishnah, sometimes the Mishnah doesn't have a name. Sometimes it says Rabbanan or Chachamim, and then it says an individual's name, right? The basic idea is that when it's an outlier, an individual speaking at a certain moment in history, meaning the time already of the Tanaim, we quote it and ascribe it to their name. It's disputed, and it means may only be their opinion. It may be their mistaken impression of what it is that they are transmitting, what they heard from their teacher, or an accurate transmission of what they heard from their teacher, who is still from an era when the halachic system was not associated with people yet. There was not yet a need for redemption, if you will. The geula is only required when there's a sense of galut. And that's actually one of the things that happens is the Mishnah becomes a book. Well, before it's a book in writing, it's a book, quotation marks, air quotes, that is known to people as a body of knowledge. But it has to be attached to people when there's already this back and forth about who said what. There's no such thing in the times of David HaMelech. He asked for a question. They brought him the answer. It was clear what the answer was. It's not recorded. So he just says, you know what? You shouldn't have done it that way. But also, there's no need to quote it in their name. Instead, whose name is it quoted in? Nobody. The name of the Sanhedrin, without names, and a vignette where who's asking shilas? David HaMelech. Who wants to know what the right way is? David HaMelech. And who is not willing, even if he's technically going to get off the hook, going to accept the permission that he's given by the Sanhedrin? David HaMelech. Other signs of David HaMelech's mightiness, his greatness as a person, not expressed in the battlefield in his conquest of territory or his military exploits, vanquishing dragons, proverbially, but actually in himself, vanquishing his own dragon, his own, Yetzer. I'm the king, do whatever I want. And many, many, many examples of the unchecked impulse to apply power that run the gamut, let's say, from ancient history and until the present day. Yeah. Look with me now at Pasuk Yud Chet, back at page 397. Vavisha achi Yoav ben Seruya urosh hashlosha v'hu orer et chanito al shlosh meot chalal v'lo shem b'shlosha. So again, a whole discussion about the exploits of Avishai. Min hashlosha achi nichbad v'yihi lahem l'sar v'ad hashlosha lova, and so on and so forth. That he's sort of the head of them all. He was the captain, but he's one of those three, not in the triumvirate of the main leaders. Uvanayo ben Yehoyada. I'm skipping this part. We're going to come back to ben Yehoyada in the next book. He's going to feature more prominent, but remember that name. Uvanayo ben Yehoyada ben Ish Chayil Rav Pa'alim Mikav Tze'el Hu Hika Shnei Ariel Moav V'hu Yarad V'hika et Ha'ari B'toch Habor B'yom HaShalag. Well, I'm coming back to this in the next book, not for today. V'hu Hika et Ish Mitzri Ish Mar'eh Uv'yad HaMitzri Chanit Vayared Elav Bashavet Vayigzor HaChanit Miyad HaMitzri Vayargei B'Chanito. He's fighting Egyptians. Where is he fighting Egyptians? Very strange, but it's mentioning as a person who is Egyptian at least. Eila Asa Benayahu ben Yoyada V'lo Shem B'Shlosha Giborim Min Shoshan Nichbad V'Shlosha Lova V'Yismeu David El Mishmato. All right, so he got his own position. Benayahu ben Yoyada. Remember that name. He's in the next Sefer, very prominent. Asayel Achi Yoav Bashloshim Elchanan ben Dodo Beit Lachem Shama Acharodi Elika Acharodi Cheletz Apalti Ira ben Ikei Shatkoi. My eyes are glazing over, and I'm the one doing the reading.
Asahel, isn't that the one that was killed by Avner? The brother of Asahel, the brother of Yoav.
Yeah.
So then,
it's
for sure,
through...
this is way back. This is before,
Yeah. Like I said, it's a retrospective. It's a catalog. Correct. Cheletz Apalti Ira ben Ikei Shatkoi. This person from Tekoa. Aviezer Ha'antoti. Muvnei Achushati, sorry, Salmona Achoti, Mari Anatofati, Chelev ben Ba'ana Anatofati, Itai ben Rivai, Migivat Bnei Binyamin, Benel Pir Atoni, Hidai, Minach Legash, Avi Almon, Arvati, Azmavet, Habar Chami, El Yachba, Hasha'al Boni, Sha'al Boni, Bnei Yashen Yehonatan, Shama Harari, Achiam ben Sharar Ha'arari, Elifelet ben Achasbai, ben Ma'achati, Eliam ben Achitofel Giloni, Chetzri. There's a method to my madness, by the way. Otherwise, I would have said, everyone go home and read it yourself. Keep listening to these names. Chetzri HaKarmeli, Pariha Arbi, Yigal ben Natan, Mitzova ben Bani Hagadi, Selek Ha'amoni, Nachria be'eroti, Nosei Klei Yoav ben Sruya, Ira Hayitri, Garev Hayitri, Uriah Hachiti, Kol Shloshim V'Shiv'a. Last name on the list, that's when our ears perk up. He is part of the main mighty warriors of David, among the most trusted of the soldiers. He's one of the greats on the level of Pshat. And right here, we learn this equals 37. This is number 37 on a list of some sort, yeah? Okay, this is all good and well, and should remind us, oh, okay, now we understand. It's just after all the mightiness, we find out, oh yeah, by the way, there was also this this betrayal that happened. And if you want to see the point that I'm making here, that this name Uriah Hachiti is last in order to say, you know, with like two drums, like you get it now. Open up, and this last thing we'll do today, and I'll have to say goodbye. Chapter 11 in Divrei Hayamim Aleph. Chapter 11, page whatever it is, 963. 963. We were already on this page earlier today, yeah? So when you're reading on chapter 11, from verse 10, where it says, these are the heads of the Giborim, Ashur David, I mean, on page 963, that's Divrei Hayamim number 1, Chronicles 1, chapter 11, verse 10. And then comes the list. And if you flip the page, you'll see that the list, 2 pages, you see that the list will end on page 965, verse 47. Eliel ve'oved va'yasiel hamitzovaya. Right? Everyone see that? Now flip back 1 page and look at verse 40 on page 964. Who's listed in there? Just baked in with everybody else? Uriah Hachiti. The list in Divrei Hayamim is the comprehensive list of chronology and cataloging. Here are the people, here's the story, here's what their names were. And on the list, there's a guy named Uriah Hachiti. He's like baked into the whole progression of the story in chapter 11. Yeah? He's just the guy. He's just there. That's all he is. He's one among many. But in Shmuel Bet, Perek Chav Gimel, he's the end. Whoops. He's the last word. He's the last words of the Perek, Davka. To highlight, like with a highlighter, remember him? And that sort of closes the unit involving the mighty men of David. Of course, there's always more to say. We could have gone through more psukim, but we're going to come back to Benel ben Yoyada in the next Sefer, known as Sefer Malachim. So we'll close it here for now, chapter 23. Next week and the next 4 weeks on Thursdays at 9:30, I'm sort of rebranding our shiur temporarily to invite others to want to join us. The series is going to be called The First Coronavirus of Jewish History, but it will begin with Shmuel Bet, Perek Chaf Dalid, and come back for that, and we'll learn about it together at that time. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thank you, Yishkara.
Have a great day.